Hello YouTube and welcome to Katrinka Wants to Know, where I find out what I want to know. And today we have Ronnie here, who's a guitar teacher, and we're going to talk about guitar. So welcome, Ronnie.
Thank you, Katrinka.
It's good to have you.
Likewise, glad to be here.
So, how did you get into teaching guitar?
I would say by accident. I never woke up and made a plan to teach. I had a very enjoyable job. I worked at a car factory where we made all the interior to the Chevrolet Corvette, the Humvee, just to mention a few. And I was union president of that facility. I had a nice desk job, and on the weekends, all through my 20-year career there at the plant, I would play professional music. And one day I walked in and there was a notice on the board saying that the plant was slated to close. And that was a little hard to accept the first few months, but I had friends that were always encouraging me, Ronnie, you need to teach. And I was faithful to say no. But they believed in me and they would circulate my name. So the week that the plant actually did close, I received a phone call from a lady who she ran this art studio called Energy Performing Arts, and she just begged me to start. So I gave in, not believing in myself, not thinking I am a good teacher, but I started with one student. My one student turned to 10 by the end of the month, 10 turned to 20, and then to 30, and at that point I was sort of set.
So it was meant to be.
I think so.
And you teach all age levels.
Yeah, that's probably one of the big surprises when you start off teaching. I think that's one of the most common questions, Katrinka, you get asked is my child old enough, or am I too old? And really there's no age that's disqualifying. I find that it's really based on your appetite.
So how long have you been doing this?
I'm going to stick the end of the tape measure back to when I was a freshman in high school. To my surprise, my dad just walked in my bedroom one day and said, hey, I've got a phone call from Maxine. She wants to know if you might teach her how to play bass with her church choir. And that's neat that Maxine was, maybe that's just a time that we lived in, but she was courteous enough that instead of contacting me first, she contacted my dad and asked if I might teach her how to play bass. And I thought, teach someone? I never dreamed of teaching someone. But in a few months, she was playing with her church. And then maybe a year later, maybe a sophomore in high school, another phone call. Cotton, that was my dad's name. You think Ronnie might teach me how to play bass? So my first two students were bass players, and that was sort of sporadic, but my teaching career actually began then.
Wow. All right. Now, can anyone learn guitar?
Absolutely. I have even fast forwarded to the necessary question, Katrinka, and that's this. It's not how much music talent you have. It's not how much your instrument costs. The most important question that anyone has to answer, just to get to the main detail, is, do you have 15 minutes a day that you can dedicate, no messing around, but practicing? Now 15 minutes is that minimum that you could practice every day, not skipping. and could learn just about everything I have ever taught. But once you start doing that, it's really amazing how challenging. Like today might be the washer quit day, or tomorrow might be my car needs tires day, and so to me that's the real question. Can I dedicate that minimum amount of time? And if you can, I think anybody can learn.
Well, that's encouraging.
Yes.
For everyone listening, all right, now, how can a student be successful in learning guitar? You kind of touched on that,
Mm-hmm.
the consistency of 15 minutes a day.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that from experience, not academically, but from experience. I think the student should have a love for what they're attempting to learn. I know a lot of people might begin their lessons. Mom says, you need to get off the couch. Or dad says, I think you're talented. But I think it really should begin with that student's own appetite, actually loving music. And then the next step would be securing an instrument. For some folks, Katrinka, that's no big deal. For others, it's very challenging. I think what I find amazing is those people that may not be handicapped in the pocketbook or wallet, they too struggle with the question of what is a good learning instrument. So appetite for the music, securing a instrument that's one that you don't have to fight. A lot of times people will flock to the pawn shop, buy a guitar that's been hanging there for 3 years, and it looks like a bow and arrow. And that's a really uphill way of learning. And then learning the proper steps of how to play an instrument. A lot of times I call it the Frankenstein effect. We will choose novelties like, oh, I love that lick, or I love that little jingle. And then after a year goes by, it's like the monster Frankenstein. We're just stitched up in pieces, and we never learn the proper way of beginning to end. So that's just 3 things, Katrinka, that comes to mind that I think a lot of people may have struggles with.
I don't like that term, the Frankenstein
Yes,
effect.
yes.
Okay. What is the biggest revelation you've had because of teaching guitar?
I could answer that differently every day. I think it's almost like asking, what is your favorite scripture or your favorite book, but it might depend on what your challenge or what you're going through today. But I think my biggest revelation today, I'd always made an agreement that I would never take anybody's money, especially a parent's money, if I seen for a second that their kid was not trying, not practicing, not making an effort. I would let them know, even financially, it might hurt me. And so my biggest revelation, I had a little blonde-haired girl, and I stepped outside with her parent one evening. I said, listen, I love Jody to death. But basically every week we're recovering what we covered the week before and the week before. And I hate to feel like I'm taking your money. Well, here was my eye-opening moment. She says, Ronnie, it's not all about the music. I love her spending time with you. She loves you. You're a good influence on her. And if she's here, it means she's not over there with that crowd. I've never seen that coming. And now I look back on that and I think, no, it's not all about what happens on the fretboard. It's about relationships, and sometimes what I would call being distracted in a good way, filling our life with a good distraction. So I think music sometimes, where a student or the teacher might think, progress, are you making progress? But maybe God or divine providence allowed that to come into our lives, Perhaps someone gave you a banjo or a guitar, when all along the goal was to keep you distracted because he knew you was a worrywart. And if you had time to focus on playing this, you wouldn't be thinking about that ulcer or is that cancer or things like that.
Well, that was a wise parent.
Yes, and I never have forgot that lesson she taught me.
Now, what's the funniest story you can tell us about teaching guitar?
Okay, two comes to mind. I once taught a lawyer in Madisonville, and he was blind. He wasn't sure if we could do this or not, but I thought we'll give it a try. And a couple months into it, the question was answered, yes, I can teach a blind student and he can learn. And one day he was running late from the office, so he asked me if I could just teach his lesson there. And that's when I had to remind him that I was not blind and would he mind turning the lights on. So it's just amazing. And then I think secondly, Katrinka, I had a student tell me one time he said, and I quote, "Ronnie, please quit telling me or reminding me that I need to practice. I'm paying you good money and I come here to get away from my wife."
Oh, no.
And I think he meant it.
There's always a goal, right?
That was his.
Okay. So tell us about the highs and the lows of teaching guitar.
Well, it's always good to start with the highs. I think the highs are logging on to Facebook or you receive a notification and you begin to see students, and most often they are kids, maybe that 8, 10, 14-year-old, and you're physically watching a church video of them playing a song that only a few weeks ago you taught them. You hear the church erupt in applause, and you hear comments like, "Oh, you're so talented." That is a high, knowing that 10 out of 10 people die. We all die. But in that moment, I think my music will carry on in this child. Mm. So that would be the high, or one of the highs I would reference. I get to witness that sometimes daily, sometimes weekly, knowing that music will outlive me and that I got to turn my talent into 1 or 2, 3 or 4. But after 30 years of teaching, more than I can count, I think the low would be, I would say, just thinking on my feet here, I get asked a lot like, what is a student that you lost, or who is somebody that you could not teach? Okay, I can answer this question from experience. The hardest situation for me to deal with is when that boy or that girl has played every note and everything correctly. You're grinning, you're smiling, and you tell them, "Well done." But in their mind, they're defeated. They don't agree with that. And at some point, if that continues, you just cannot teach someone that never believes in themselves, and it's almost like a stump that you can't plow around. And that is so tragic when their own opinion of themselves is something you could never change. That's probably about the only student that you could not teach.
Wow. That is kind of sad.
Yeah, and Katrinka, if you think of a remedy, let me know. But I have just never been able to slay that dragon when you even record someone and you challenge them to listen. Hey, you played it as good as I can. But in their mind, no. The answer's always no.
So let's go on to something a little happier here.
Okay.
Do you still do gigs?
Yeah, Absolutely.
So what's your favorite venue?
I think you will enjoy this answer. So, growing up in music years as a musician, some of my mentors they would tell me things like, Ronnie, poor people play radio, rich people hire a band, and I never did quite get that till I started playing or doing a lot of gigs, and and I found out that if I was well paid, a lot of times I could take my shirt off or anything, and the audience would never notice it. However, people that really had to work hard to pay my band would seize upon every note and every word I sang. So absolutely, I think any musician that does this for part of their living would tell you, those that scraped up money for that daughter's precious birthday, those are actually the the most enjoyable gigs, not the corporate ones where so much money is set aside and would your band play for our company picnic. It's those where it's lower in turnout and people are able to scoot up right there to your knees and watch everything you do, and you feel like they're engaged with every lick, every song, every word you sing.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, what would we be surprised to learn about the guitar?
What would be surprising? I think the answer always comes back like this, Katrinka. It always has the same face, the same look. And that is, in a matter of minutes, anyone can play. I see this happen daily. I have a friend just last week, and this is always, it seems like for the person asking it, more challenging than me answering it. Ronnie, do you think I could play? And the answer is always yes. And I think the challenge there is so many people, they want to start on the 6th or 7th rung of the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, I had a friend back in the military. He showed me some chords. Well, congratulations, you started on the 8th or 9th rung. That must have been painful. But if we actually start with the instrument as a way of conditioning and build our way up, it's very enjoyable. So the most surprising thing is anybody can play. It doesn't belong to just a few certain elite.
All right, well, this has been enlightening and an enjoyable interview. And thanks so much for coming to the studio.
My pleasure, Katrinka.
And like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.